thousands of years before the formation of the Old Galactic Republic, the future capital of Coruscant was home to two intelligent, sentient humanoid species in a desperate struggle for supremacy and survival. Though the history of these earlier eras remains highly disputed, the most well-known version of events claims that roughly 200,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the native and technologically primitive Taung and qel were engaged in a brutal war. Possibly evolving on the planet then known as Notron, the qel may have been the original human ancestors who ventured out into the stars, colonizing countless worlds beyond the system. Their enemies were the Taung, a bipedal race similarly evolved from simians, but with gray skin and yellow eyes, far more physically powerful and resilient than humans, on average reaching 6 feet tall and 210 pounds. They lived to about 85 and showed no sensitivity to the Force. Speaking a Proto-Mando'a language, the Taung were clan-based warriors who lived by an honor code and worshipped a war god, seeing battle as an opportunity for personal honor, which might also bring glory to their community. Earning prestige and reputation through victory, their most skilled and successful warriors were made leaders, wielding absolute authority over the clans. Taking pride in their armor and weapons, Taung wore special helms shaped like their faces, polishing them to shine in sunlight and intimidate their opponents. A pragmatic people who spoke plainly, they named their children after traits they might strive to embody, like Kot, which translates to strength, Tor, meaning justice, and Atin, or persistent. Whatever internal wars they may have fought, the Taung seem to have united under a single leader when fighting a war for survival against the 13 nations of qel. Under the leadership of the legendary hero known as the Doom of Ulmara, the Taung waged a devastating campaign that saw them capture the enemy capital of Great Zell. During the battle, another storied hero, Olhak the Reaver, led a daring charge to reach the high places of the city and stake his standard, though it was later cast down into the mire. Suffering devastating casualties for this impressive victory, the Taung were left few in number and highly vulnerable to the qel armies gathering outside the capital to take back their home. Making matters worse, Ulmara was killed in the fighting, leaving them leaderless and unprotected. The epic poem, Da Huerta Verda, was later written to commemorate these momentous events, claiming the Taung were greatly demoralized by the loss of their leader, and so under the rule of his successor, Rexuru the Unconquerable, the warriors marched to the high places of the city for their last stand. At first, the humans were intimidated by the well-armored warriors looming above them, but soon enough they noticed how few remained, and so became boastful and cheerfully gathered to finish off their rivals. Yet just as the end drew near, the Taung received what they interpreted as a blessing from the Maker God, when a volcano suddenly erupted, breaking apart the city while blanketing the sky in smoke, covering the land in deep shadow. Although the battalions of qel gathering outside the city fell to their knees in shock and terror, the Taung were inspired, believing the Maker had come to unmake, and the Taung would be his instruments. Known henceforth as the Warriors of the Shadow, they charged forward and slaughtered the qel armies, finally becoming the dominant species of Coruscant. However, the qel were adaptable and resilient in their own way, surviving as a people and biding their time until gathering sufficient numbers to rebel in a war so successful they drove their enemies entirely off Coruscant, claiming the world for the qel and humanity. Defeated and without a home, most of the Taung embarked upon a journey to the Outer Rim, where they settled the world Rune, continuing their warrior traditions to establish a civilization that endured thousands of years. Yet there was another faction, a cult of priestesses under the name Warriors of Shadow, which separated from the others, again seeking the Outer Rim, but in their case, traveling to the 12-star clusters of the Nihil Retreat, where they explored a philosophy of atonement through introspection and meditation. Fighting a war with the rival Nell of Muspili, over time the factions merged together and even incorporated the teachings of the Kanzur exiles to create the Sorcerers of Rand cult, which followed the way of the dark, believing entropy was the most powerful force in the universe, and so any action which brought forth death would be rewarded by the dark. Meanwhile, the rest of the Taung population carved out an even greater legacy, as their years on the planet Rune increased their focus on warfare until their people united under the leadership of Mandalore I, an absolute ruler who reformed their civilization to focus almost exclusively on combat, loyalty to the clan, and obeying their honor code. Departing from Rune, Mandalore I led the Taung on a journey to find a new homeworld, finally settling on an unpopulated Outer Rim planet, teeming with dangerous wildlife but primarily dominated by gigantic, powerful creatures they called mythosaurs. Exterminating the species to claim the land, the Taung were nonetheless impressed by the prowess of these beasts, and so took the mythosaur skull as the symbol of their people. Growing to revere the leader that set them on this path to martial glory, the Taung named their planet Manda'yaim, or Mandalore, and themselves mand'alor, or Mandalorians, considering themselves the sons and daughters of Mandalore. After the death of Mandalore I, the Taung established the tradition of choosing their greatest warrior as the new, undisputed ruler, the only being alive that could unite their strong-willed clans to a single purpose. Honoring the traditions of the past, the Taung remained a highly religious people, even as they transitioned to Mandalorians, dedicating much of their culture to honoring the war god Kad Harangir, who brought about change and growth through destruction. He stood in opposition to Arasam, the sloth god of idleness and stagnation. Therefore, the Mandalorians waged war as a form of worship, believing the death and devastation they caused brought about a greater good of renewal, so things might be born anew, better than before. Armed with this philosophical and theological justification, the Mandalorians left their planet to become a semi-nomadic people, following leaders like Mandalore the Conqueror to wage war across their system and beyond, greatly expanding their territory and influence. It was while exterminating the insectoids of Nevuda that the Taung started to experience warfare and conquest with an increasingly religious fervor, becoming Mandalorian crusaders, who believed it their duty to fight an unending holy crusade across the galaxy. Much of Crusader culture was defined by the canons of honor, which promised honor and glory to those who sought warfare and remained loyal to their clan. But just as important was the Raisonner, or Six Actions, which stated all Mandalorians must wear armor, speak Mandoa, defend themselves and their family, raise any children as Mandalorians, contribute to the welfare of their clan, and rally to the Mandalore should he call for his people. Among the many species and worlds destroyed by these early Mandalorians, there were the insectoids of Nevuda, the Fenalar, the Kuarans, the Talonians, and the Basiliskans, a lizard species which rode basilisk war droids, a technology seized and adopted by their conquerors. Yet not all those targeted by the Crusaders were so easily bested, as the Mandalorians were defeated and repelled by a planet in their own system. Unable to subdue the giants of Mandalia, the Crusaders were so impressed they called off the invasion to instead become allies, welcoming the giants into Mandalorian society. Intrigued by these alien warriors, many of the giants joined the ranks of the Mandalorians, beginning a culture shift in which they no longer viewed themselves as a species, but rather a culture and creed that could be adopted by anyone willing to accept their faith and traditions. According to legend, it was under the courageous and relentless Taung warrior known as Mandalore the Indomitable that their religious views underwent a radical reformation, as their leader claimed to have had a vision on the planet Shogun that convinced him to eliminate the Mandalorian pantheon of gods in favor of venerating warfare directly. Ramping up their wars of destruction and conquest, Mandalore the Indomitable led his crusaders to many victories, until finally defeated in single combat by the former Jedi-turned-Sith Lord qel-droma, apprentice to the Dark Lord Exar Kun, who was planning an invasion of the old Galactic Republic. Though Mandalore sought no mercy and asked for death, Ulic instead made them allies, beginning a partnership that brought devastation to the galaxy in the Great Sith War of 3996 BBY. The Mandalorians fought in the battles of Forost, Coruscant, and Onderon, only to suffer a humiliating defeat at the hands of the Republic and Jedi, forced to scatter, with some seeking refuge on the dangerous moon Duxin, where their ruler was killed by vicious wildlife. When other Mandalorians went looking for their leader, a lone Taung male found the ceremonial mask as all that remained, and so placed it on his face, declaring himself the new Mandalore, convinced it was his destiny to bring their people out of despair and toward new heights of honor and glory. Known as Mandalore the Ultimate, he established the moon of Duxin as a base of operations, and traveled to the stars, seeking to reunite their scattered people under his leadership. Meanwhile, back on Mandalore, some of the disillusioned veterans, still outraged over their defeat in the Great Sith War, decided to start their own faction of Neo-Crusaders, which emphasized hierarchy and discipline. Proving themselves in smaller engagements, these Neo-Crusaders became the most effective and efficient warriors on Mandalore, attracting many to their cause, including Mandalore the Ultimate, who brought them into his domain, using their fighters as a vanguard in many winning battles. It was under the influence of Mandalore the Ultimate and the Neo-Crusaders that recruitment policies among their people evolved, no longer simply accepting those who wished to join their ranks, but now actively recruiting and seeking out new comrades, paying no heed to their species or former allegiances, so long as they followed Mandalorian doctrine. Growing their numbers rapidly, the Taung now fought beside various different species as equals, including many humans descended from the ancient Gel enemies which chased them from Coruscant. Although Mandalore the Ultimate did well in rebuilding their people, bringing back a sense of power and prestige, everything changed in 3978 BBY, when he met a red-skinned emissary from the hidden Sith Empire of Dark Lord Vitiate. Told the Emperor saw a vision of Mandalorian victory over the Republic, Mandalore was mentally manipulated by the force powers of the emissary, and so agreed to wage war against this galactic superpower. Although Emperor Vitiate did not truly see a vision, and knew the Mandalorians stood little chance of success, he used them to test enemy defenses in preparation for his own invasion of the Republic. Fighting the Mandalorian Wars from 3976 to 3960 BBY, Mandalore the Ultimate was finally defeated in the Battle of Malachor V, killed in single combat by the Jedi hero Revan, who took the leader's mask to prevent another from taking his place. Suffering yet another cataclysmic defeat, the Taung species that once entirely made up the Mandalorian people were now all but extinct, with Mandalore the Ultimate widely recognized as the last Taung leader of their people. Yet the legacy of their warrior culture was inherited by the other species who adopted these traditions and passed them on to future generations. Some years later, Revan gave the Mask of Mandalore to Canderous Ordo, a trusted Mandalorian ally, asking him to unite his people as Mandalore the Preserver in the hopes of rebuilding their strength to one day fight in defense of the Republic. Reluctantly accepting the role, Canderous embarked on a campaign to unite, preserve, and strengthen the Mandalorian people. Although many thought the Taung were gone, Canderous Ordo stated he encountered a dying Taung warrior in his travels, who claimed he was the true ruler of their people, leading a faction that saw Mandalore the Ultimate as an illegitimate pretender. Deeming Canderous worthy, the leader gifted him a set of impressive armor, and granted his blessing for this human to inherit, preserve, and pass on the legacy of the Taung. Bringing this small faction into his clan, Mandalore the Preserver did his duty, ensuring the survival of their people for thousands of years to come, with Mandalorian warrior culture remaining active up to the reign of Emperor Palpatine and beyond. A special thanks to all those who contribute to Civilization X, like Sir Dayron of House Ashford, Fred Heartless, Knight of Iron and Ice, Ishmael Ahmed of Shamidiana, and Barachado. If you'd like to help the channel, be sure to give a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and click on the links below, or else go to patreon.com/civilizationx, where you can gain early access to videos, vote on future content, and watch the Patreon-only series, Heroes of Lore and Legend.